Welcome back to Reading Bear. Today, we will take a look at some new revenge stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
The first one is titled, Take the Car I Paid For. Good luck finding the dead fish in it. When I was 15 I began working, and by the time I was 17 I had enough money to buy my first car. Me being young, when my egg donor and stepdad said they were titling it in their name, for insurance and registration purposes, I didn't question it. 6 months later, they're divorcing. When the divorce is finalized, my egg donor informs me that my car, that I paid for, was going to my ex-stepdad in the divorce, since it showed a joint property between them. I was furious. The car looked nice on the exterior, but burned through a quart of oil every 2 days, and drove like crap, but it was still my car. The week before my ex-stepdad was due to pick it up, I quit putting oil in it. I drove around town extra that week. I was that smoke cloud in town of burning oil. To top off my revenge, my friend had a goldfish die. It was a pretty big fish, 3 to 4 inches long. I asked for it. The morning of the car being taken, July mind you, I cut the yellow foam beneath the passenger seat. The foam was sticky, abrasive, and resealed easily due to the stickiness. I cut the foam, and stuffed the dead fish into the padding, and pushed it as far over as I could, then the foam stuck back together nicely. He showed up with his girlfriend. Girlfriend was the mistress, thus causing the divorce, and he made a big show of giving her my car as a gift to her. I just smiled. I wish I knew how well the car went over, hours later, in the hot July weather, but I can imagine. Edit, egg donor is my bio mother, but she doesn't deserve any recognition in my life other than contributing genetic material. My bio dad is a wonderful, amazing person who was dragged through the coals for child support. He paid $150 a week in 1987, plus insurance, 50% of all insurance co-pays, had to do an additional $150 each child for school clothes, pay for school lunches, fees, and book rental. He worked 8 to 12 hours a day as a plumber, and part-time in a factory. He had nothing, and couldn't go into a futile court case with my egg donor, since back then the state didn't give custody to dads. I never told him about my life at her house, since I didn't want him to worry. The next one is titled, No Black-Eyed Peas for Karens. So I live in the South, Texas specifically, and down here there's a tradition that every good Southern home makes and eats black-eyed peas for New Year's. It's supposed to bring good luck in the coming year. I'm not crazy superstitious, but I'm not taking any chances with 2021. Well, being the organized human I am, I left this until the last minute and only remembered when my boyfriend asked if I'd picked up some peas on my last grocery run. So I bowled out the door and head for the nearest grocery store. I went to 4 stores looking for these little bastards. But the time I get to the last store I'm ready to take anything, frozen, canned, pre-made whatever, or call it quits. I decide to check the aisle with dried beans first, in the slim hope I could find the real deal. And as I round the corner for the aisle I can see a lady has cornered some poor stock boy and has his back against the wall of beans. She's full on wagging her finger in his face and ripping into him. Karen, what do you mean you don't have any black-eyed peas? I saw you restocking these shelves with beans and need them for tonight. Don't you understand tradition? Employee, ma'am, I don't think we have any left. If they aren't in the display case, then we're probably out. But we do have canned and frozen. Karen, no. I don't want canned or frozen. I need real black-eyed peas. She continues to ream out this poor kid as I walk to the other side of them and to the shelf where the black-eyed peas are usually stored. Call it a hunch or a blind hope, but I crouched down to look all the way in the back and sure enough there were 2 bags left, tucked away in the shadows. I fished them out with a little difficulty, yay for having short arms, and by the time I got them both out, Karen had taken notice. When she saw me pull out the peas she gasped. Literally gasped like I had unmasked the villain in a Scooby-Doo cartoon. Karen, so you do have black-eyed peas. You lied to me. You ought to be ashamed of yourself, young man. Excuse me, miss? One of those bags is mine. She then holds out one hand and curls her fingers in a fork them over motion. Now I could have given her the bag. I only needed one. But damn it, I used to work retail and I can tell you that poor employee was not paid enough to deal with her attitude. Especially not this year. So I put on my best smile and said, "Sorry ma'am. I need these for my own New Year's Eve tradition, you know." And plopped them into my basket. She had a fit. Called me a selfish millennial brat with no respect for her elders and asked what was her family supposed to do now. I kept my head held high, squashed down my inner, anxious people-pleasing side of me, and headed for the register. I'm now doing a quick soak of the beans and drinking a celebratory mimosa. Enjoy your unlucky 2021, Karen. The next one is titled, Revenge by Proxy on My Former Bully Boss via My New Boss. S equals former boss, O equals current boss. I left an office job for teacher training. Now this office job was incredibly toxic. I'd constantly be getting berated and humiliated for the tiniest of mistakes. Sometimes it wouldn't be mistakes, but me not doing things the correct way, and once or twice even over things that weren't my fault. While I wouldn't say he was the worst culprit, he took silver or bronze, contributed a lot to this culture, and was very much in there with the other bullying instigators. One afternoon, he spent 2 hours going through things on my desk, aggressively asking me why I had certain things on my desk before yelling at me to throw them in the bin, in front of everyone. Another time, he threatened me with performance management if, and this is true, I didn't start crossing things out of my notepad. He'd chew me out for things which, as I said, weren't my fault or responsibility, but because his bully buddies decided it would be a good idea to throw me under the bus over it anyway, he'd bend over backwards for them like he always did, and put me in the crap. He'd only ever speak to me if he was having a go at me about something or if he wanted me to do him a favor. He'd demand I cover other members of staff in other departments, so I'd be unable to complete my own actual work and my workload would pile up. When I had one-to-ones with him, he'd ask me to bring my bits into his office, which was my work trays with my paperwork, so he could root through it and scrutinize everything. He'd often try to guilt-trip me when telling me off, such and such has worked so hard to make sure everything is right, so mistakes like this aren't helping. He just wasn't my idea of a good person to have in charge. Spineless, micromanaging, disrespectful, condescending, and he clearly had ego issues as well, with the way he'd always need to assert himself to me and make an example of me. So, as I said, I quit to do teacher training, and in stark contrast to my previous job, and despite how more challenging the work was in comparison, it went very well. Lots of praise, lots of positivity, lots of encouragement, and any time I actually got anything wrong, it was addressed in a helpful and constructive manner. A breath of fresh air, right after what I had to endure. The teacher training went so well that the head of department, wanted me to stay on at that school for my second placement. The second placement was more difficult because of course I had more lessons to teach, but despite this it went very well, and I was still going from strength to strength. My mentor, and could see this, and eventually offered me a teaching role for the following year, subject to me passing my training first of course. The problem was, because I had the same mentor for both placements, I was only able to have one reference from my experience within a school. So suggested to me to ask my former boss for a character reference. I made some comment in passing, trying to play it off as a joke about how he was a bit of a dick, but started pushing me as to why I thought that. I ended up telling him quite a lot, not just about but the other two employees who would antagonize me. He was surprised I got treated like that because he thought I had a great attitude towards work, and I always worked hard and pushed myself to get better and better. He said they sounded like horrible people and I did right to get out of somewhere where I wasn't being treated well. So I bit the bullet and called my old boss to ask for a reference, which he disinterestedly said, "Yeah, okay." No asking how I was, no asking how I'd been getting on. Just a minute-long conversation. I passed his number and then called me into his office. Basically said to me he was going to call on loudspeaker, and he wanted me to be there for it. I asked him why, and he said, "Just watch." Called who answered, there was the usual greeting, and then explained that he needed a reference. Responded with a very generic, "He works hard, he turns up on time, he's a nice guy," etc., as if it was a formality. Then, the conversation went a little like this, not exactly quote by quote, but you get the picture. S, how's he been getting on? Oh, really well, he's progressing brilliantly, he clearly works hard, his subject knowledge is strong, he's well prepared and organized for his lessons, and it's a pleasure to be giving him a full-time job here at our school. S, oh, that's good to hear. Oh, yeah, he's been fantastic. I don't want to sound big-headed here and take credit for his progress, because he's done so well, but you know what I think has been a huge factor in this? S, what's that? Oh, the fact we've treated him with respect and helped him with his confidence. Pause. Oh, so you know when you humiliate members of staff in front of everyone, going through their belongings, and you threaten them with sanctions over silly things like not crossing things out of their notepad, and you expect their performance to improve. It doesn't work. Another pause. S, sheepishly. Oh, how do you know about that? He hasn't told you. Oh, he's told me everything. Are you surprised his performance dropped with the way you treated him? S, awkwardly laughing. Well, you know, sometimes where we are, we have days where it gets stressful, so everyone needs to be on top of their, oh, I'm a teacher. I know what a stressful work environment is. But instead of belittling your staff, you work together and help each other. Because of your attitude, and the attitude of your little friends, you have lost a brilliant member of staff, but your loss is our gain. S, well, he'd make mistakes and we'd just talk to him about them. Oh, yeah, and he hasn't got everything 100% perfect here. He doesn't get everything right all the time, none of us do. But we don't demonize him or humiliate him or make him feel useless and stupid and incompetent. We encourage him to work on these areas in a helpful manner, and he responds well, because we treat him with respect, and we also focus strongly on the positives too. There's load of positives, by the way. S, look, can I call you back? I've just got to do something real quick. S never called him back. I was quite taken aback by what O did. I couldn't believe what I was seeing and hearing. He's always been a good guy and he's always looked out for me, but I would have thought what I told him about my old job, he'd feel was none of his business. That was about as good as it gets, because I never once pulled my work bullies up about their crap. I just avoided all confrontation, and they must have felt that after I left, they got away with it. I'm glad I was able to, in a way, finally get my revenge. Maybe not as brutal as some of the other stories on here, but for a moment. S was made to feel small as a result of his behavior towards me, and that was satisfying enough. The next one is titled, Too Uncouth for Petty. About 10 years ago, my mother was in a long drawn-out family court issue with my father. Basically, he didn't want to pay for child support while my younger brother was still in college. His lawyer was a piece of work and, allegedly, provided my mum with the wrong court date on one of the motions, so my mum could not respond in time and a judge ruled in his favor by default. This was only a temporary win and we appealed. By we I mean my mother and I. My mother was self-represented and I was in college for a legal admin assistant course and had access to court procedures and software to easily fill out legal affidavits and forms. My mum couldn't afford a lawyer, but wasn't poor enough for a court-appointed lawyer, so instead she sought advice from duty counsel, and we did our best to represent our pretty simple case. Dad needs to pay child support while son is in college. The longer this dragged out, the more my father had to pay in legal fees. Was this the revenge? Hell no. We hated this lawyer for her dirt trick. She was angry at my mother because in a previous court session, where her client was caught lying to a judge, the judge ruled in my mother's favor. She did not take kindly to losing to someone self-representing. So when she filed a motion on behalf of my father, everyone, the court got the right court date except us. Q Petty Revenge. 1. I paid for certified mail to be served at her office within the last 30 minutes on the last day any affidavit or document was due as per regulations set by the Law Society of Upper Canada. I always smiled a little when I knew she would get it right before a long weekend. 2. Somewhere in her last name were the letters can't. Every time either my mother or I printed her name, be it legal document or envelope, we left just the slightest gap atop the so that it may, at times, be mistaken for a U. I don't need to spell that out for you. Immature? Yes. Petty? Yes. Did the courts eventually rule in my mum's favor and my father owed back pay? Yes. The next one is titled, My House, My Rules. This happened years ago when my kids were preschool age. My Mill, fortunately now ex-Mill, never liked me much. She was always very critical of me and of how I parented my kids. My daughter, about age 6, was one of those kids whose hair grew very slowly, and she had been trying for more than a year to grow her hair out long. Her bangs were at that weird stage where they're both too long and too short. I had bought a bunch of fun little clips and hairbands for her to keep them back during this stage of growth, so her hair wasn't untidy in any way. Well, one weekend my Mill decided to take my 6-year-old daughter for a few hours. This was fine, something that occasionally happened. When she brought my daughter back, her beautiful hair she'd worked on so long was cut extremely short, like Tinkerbell short. My daughter was obviously distressed and in tears. I said, "What the duck did you do?" to my Mill, and she shrugged and said she was tired of my daughter's hair hanging in her face and that in her house, little girls had to have tidy hair or it gets cut off. I was so angry, I told her to get out. Then I comforted my daughter and told her she was beautiful no matter what, that nobody had the right to tell her how her hair should be or cut it without her permission, and that I'd make sure it never happened again. Skip forward a few months. Mill had a couple of show cats. The real fluffy ones with flat faces, Himalayan? She doted on those wheezing furballs. Thing is, she booked a cruise and needed someone to take care of them, so she brings them to my place to cat sit while she's gone. Enter the petty revenge. The day she was supposed to return and pick 'em up, I shaved both of them to look like tiny lions. When she saw them, she exploded and started screaming at me, asking why I would do such a thing. I said, "In my house, cats need to have tidy hair or it gets cut off." She never touched my kids' hair again. The next one is titled, That Woman Deserved to Get Her Butt Kicked. I work at a movie theater and, usually, I'm seen working the customer service counter and box office, as they are built into each other. On slow days, I work them both. I usually just do a lot of exchanges or refunds for bad movies or 3D showings or things of that nature, but on occasion there have been the less approachable customers, you know the type, screaming and throwing a fit. For example, we had a lady come up, who was very courteous, who claimed that the woman behind her in the theater was kicking her seat, and when she had asked them to stop, the seat-kicking lady's boyfriend claimed he was going to kick her butt after the showing was over. We had an attendant hide around the wall of the theater and listen to more of their conversations after having the woman go back into the theater. More threats of the like had been made, and so these customers were asked to leave. No refunds. No exchanges. Well, it was my lucky day because the employee who had asked them to leave was new and hadn't thought to accompany this nice couple out of the building. I couldn't blame her, though. The guy looked like he was on steroids. So, after leaving the auditorium, he made a beeline for my counter. Not realizing who he was, I asked how I could help him. "Roid man, yeah, your employee just kicked me out without a refund." Me, realizing who it was there a reason that she kicked you out? Roid man, yeah, this chick lied and said I was threatening her. Me, oh, well there's not much I can do. No employee is authorized to kick a customer out without a manager's approval, and I know for a fact that approval was given. If you would please leave. Roid man, no, forget that. Let me see that manager. Me, sigh, realizing it's going to be a long night, could manager, let's call him Jay. Please come to customer service. The man from Theater 9 would like explanation. Jay walked up and gave me a look like I should have said, "Nobody's home." Roid man, are you the manager? Why am I being kicked out? Jay, because I personally witnessed you cursing out and threatening another customer. If you're going to make a fuss about this, I'll have you banned from all of our locations for life, and the police will be called. Being banned from our locations is like being banned from the only theaters in town, sans the discount second-run theater. Roid man, this is stupid. That woman deserved to get her butt kicked. Jay, sir, that's enough. Leave now or I will call the police. Roid man, freaking call them to come save your butt, you little prick. At that point, the man ran at my manager and, just like in a freaking movie, my manager stepped aside, the guy tripped and fell on himself, and finally walked out, fuming, as everybody laughed. The last one is entitled Aunt unknowingly ended her own financial support. This actually happened at Christmas last year, but the effects are now being felt full force. My older sister, let's call her Ria, and our mum have always had a very difficult relationship ever since I could remember. Ria has always been headstrong and not afraid to ask questions. My mum was a very traditional devout Christian who put family above everything first. Bit of a background. My mum was the second eldest of 9 children and moved from the Philippines to the US. She grew up dirt poor in a small province and experienced firsthand the hardship that comes with taking care of a big family. She was the first of her family to graduate college and has always valued education as a means to get out of poverty. She has paid for 4 of her siblings to go to college, only 2 actually completed and went on to find jobs, and has also paid for several of her siblings' children to go to good schools in the Philippines. Ria had more exposure to the extended family than I did. She was born in the Philippines, I was born in US 7 years apart. As she got older, she was very outspoken about how she did not agree with my mum financially supporting some of her family because Ria felt as though they were abusing my mum's generosity, especially since mum was frugal with our expenditures here in the US. When Ria was in her last year of high school, she had a bad falling out with my mum and moved out. They did not speak for 5 years, although my dad and I kept in touch with Ria. In that time, Ria worked full-time and paid her way through college without any help from my parents at all. Fast forward a few years at my high school graduation, I invited Ria, she attended, and ended up reconciling with my mum. Things were still rocky, but they had a much better relationship. 2 years ago, my mum passed away. Unknown to me at the time, Ria had quietly taken over the continued financial support for my mum's youngest sisters, Yana, cost of living and maintaining the college fund for Yana's daughter. She also took care of the funeral arrangements and handling the estate. Dad was a mess at the time. Last year, Ria and I decided to spend the holidays in the Philippines. One of our visits was to Yana's place. Little did I know that shit was about to hit the fan when we sat down for dinner. After small talk, the topic of my mum came up and this was how that conversation went. Details may be lost in translation, so just writing the gist. Ria, J, Yana, J, such a shame, less than your mum greater than passed away. We will miss her. Yes. J, Ria, why did you stop talking to her? Why did you leave her? You should be ashamed, that's not how you treat family. Now, your mum could have raised you better. You always were too headstrong, you know, that's not ladylike, you shouldn't be so aggressive. You need to be softer. How are you going to get a man otherwise? She goes on to say more crap along these lines. Jay turns to me. Don't be like your sister, okay? Be a good daughter. Do you have a boyfriend yet? You don't want to get too old like Ria and not have your own family. That's not following God's plan. Before I could speak, Ria asked her own questions. Why did you drop out and decide to get pregnant when mum was paying for your college? Did you really think that that businessman would leave his wife to take care of you? If you wanted to be a trophy wife, you should have just said so instead of wasting my mum's hard-earned money. At this point, I just decided to watch because Yana was starting to upset me and Ria has been known to do epic takedowns. Jay, enraged. How dare you come into my house, eat my food, and disrespect me? Calmly. Technically it's my mum's house, you have food because my mum has been supporting you for the better part of 15 years and you disrespected her by wasting all the opportunities she worked hard to give to you. Jay, I don't need your attitude, or your bullshit, I don't need anything from you, you disrespectful witch. Get the hell out of my house, more rant. Gets up and smiles. You sure you don't need anything from me? You don't want anything from me? I want to confirm that I heard you correctly. Jay, I don't need crap from you, I can take care of myself and my family, and how dare you imply otherwise? Get the hell out of my house and your father will hear about this. Looks at me. You heard her, let's go. Now, I was surprised by how calmly Ria was taking the diatribe because I've seen her and my mum get into massive shouting matches. More confused than anything, I followed her to the car. Ah, you heard her right, she doesn't need anything from me. It begins to dawn on me what my sister is about to do. Yeah. Ah, okay. We get back to the hotel and my sister promptly stops the auto transfer of funds for Yana's account. We then spend the rest of the week lounging by the beach and hanging out with other cousins. Yesterday, I was talking to one of my cousins and heard that Yana is just now realizing what actually happens when you run out of money. I called up Ria shortly after to give her an update. Ah, what? She ran out of money that quick? There was enough in there to last her the year. Me, oh. Did you tell her that? Ah, basic math. Me, will she lose the house? Ah, nah. It's paid for. As long as she doesn't do something stupid, she should have a roof over her head. Me, did you also close her kid's college fund? Ah, nope. Not gonna punish the kid for her mum's stupidity. But that's all she gets, so if she ducks it up, she ducks it up. So yeah, will definitely be interesting how this plays out in the next few months. I have a feeling my sister probably won't give a damn one way or the other though. Thanks for listening.